In the next 48 hours, a form will be available on the site that we are asking these gun owners to complete, identifying what banned guns they hold. The police will then arrange for these weapons to be handed over and eventually destroyed. Details of the weapons handed back by owners that are covered by the ban will also be taken to ensure that fair and reasonable compensation is paid once the buyback is in place. If owners are unable to complete the online form, they are able to contact the police on the phone to arrange the handover of these now banned guns. I do want to emphasise, to manage the flow of information to the police online is the best way to arrange the return of your weapons. Do not arrive at the police station unannounced with these weapons in your possession. As the legislation is developed, we will determine the time available for the return of military-style semi-automatic weapons and assault rifles, and the duration of the buyback scheme. I can assure people that there will be time for the returns to be made and that they will not be criminalised overnight. After a reasonable period for returns, those who continue to possess these guns will be in contravention of the law. Currently, the penalties for this range from fines of up to $4,000 and or 3 years in prison. The draft legislation will look to increase these penalties. I want to acknowledge that the weapons available in New Zealand are only part of the problem, and loopholes with our current law continue to exist. On Monday, Cabinet will receive and consider further amendment to our gun laws. These proposals will, however, go through a more fulsome process. But be assured, this is just the beginning of the work we need to do. Finally, I want to repeat a message I have consistently shared since announcing our laws would change. We do have guns in New Zealand that are used for legitimate purposes by responsible owners every single day, and that includes our rural community. They manage pests, they're used for animal welfare and also for recreation. I've been steadfast in my belief that the vast majority of these owners will support what we are doing here today because it's about all of us. It's in the national interest and it's about safety. I will work hard to retain that support as we work on the remaining tranches of reform that we must make to prevent an act of terror happening in our country ever again. I'll now hand over to the Minister of Police.
Thank you, Prime Minister. 2 hours ago, I was amongst a group of ministers who signed off on the order which tightens the law on the sale of assault rifles. It is an interim step until legislation can be introduced and passed to ban all military-style semi-automatics. These measures will make a real difference to enable New Zealand to become a safer place. As the Prime Minister has already said, the time to act is now. The order, which is now in effect, will discourage the potential stockpiling of these assault rifles and encourage people to continue to surrender their firearms. Dozens of firearm owners have come forward so far, and I expect more will do so. Police are gearing up to enable these weapons to be taken out of circulation. They'll be supported by the New Zealand Defence Force to enable safe storage, transport and destruction of assault rifles and MSSAs. As the Prime Minister has also alluded to, police are definitely encouraging firearms owners to go to the police website and use the online form to arrange to hand over the MSSAs and assault rifles. Finally, I want to remind that it is a privilege and not a right to own a firearm in New Zealand. We know that there are many gun owners with legitimate reasons for owning firearms, especially in our rural and provincial communities. This work is not directed at them. Our focus is on ensuring the immediate safety and peace of mind of our communities.
Prime Minister, does the government have any idea of how much this buyback is going to cost?
The answer in short is not with any certainty. One of the failings of our system, of course, means that we can have a range of weapons that are of this power and calibre and simply not know how many there are. The estimate that has been made by officials is that the buyback could cost anywhere between $100 million and $200 million. but that is the price that we must pay to ensure the safety of our communities.
Prime Minister, why not ban all semi-automatic firearms?
Well, essentially, the effect of this legislation will close that gap between Australia and New Zealand. Australia had an exemption that allowed, for instance, farmers to seek permits to continue to use weapons like .22 for legitimate use. In fact, in New South Wales, there are 16,000 farmers who are able to use those kinds of guns. We've essentially achieved the same outcome, but by looking at those specific weapons that are used for legitimate use by farmers, but are not designed to undertake the kind of horror and attack that we saw on Friday.
Why not just have a permitting structure like Australia?
Essentially, as I say, achieves a very similar outcome. They used a permitting process. We've instead designated those guns which have been determined, and on the advice of the police, are not the guns that are needed to be targeted. There is legitimate use in our rural community, things like killing possums, animal welfare issues. We've targeted here the guns that are actually doing the harm in our community, and we saw that on Friday.
New Zealand had made these changes sooner.